Welcome back, everyone, to the Spiritual Uplevel Podcast. I'm your host, Jeri Cristine, and I am so excited and just honored to have my guest today, Shannon Curran. She is a transformational relationships coach and a Psyche K facilitator. And she is amazing. And I'm just going to get right into it. Shannon, you, with your relationship coaching, transformational relationship coaching, it's very different from anything that I personally have ever heard of before. And just a couple of the things we're going to hit on is shame and grandiosity, and also connecting with your partner in a way that most of us don't. And not just your partner. This is, like you said, relationships, not just your love relationship, but any kind of relationships. And before we dive deep into all of those things, can you just tell us a little bit about who is Shannon Curran and how did you come to be doing this work that you're doing today?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Um, my name is Shannon Curran. I am a mother of two teenage boys. I've been married for almost 20 years and currently living in Omaha, Nebraska. I came to this work because I needed to heal myself and I needed to heal my relationships. And I don't think that's a unique story. I think a lot of healers start that way.
Absolutely.
Um,
hmm We hear that a lot from our guests on this podcast.
yes, and it was like I'm gonna call it an early midlife crisis. I was about 36 at the time and, had a diagnosis of autoimmune disease. And after following all of the traditional medical advice without any relief, I did functional medicine, and that didn't help a lot. I did get some relief, but not as much as I was hoping for. And then I turned to energy psychology,
Mm.
and that's where I found my home.
I can relate to that. I too had when I was 36, diagnosed with early menopause and did all the things I was supposed to do and never felt better until I too went to the energy side, the spiritual side. And oddly, when you fix your energy, when you fix yourself and you go deeper into the cause and not just the symptoms, everything magically transforms, doesn't it?
It does.
So tell
It
us
really
about
does.
so tell us about that. Like you were called to that energy psychology, as you said. And did it just like light a fire for you, and you knew
Yes.
this was what you were supposed to do?
Yes, I had read a book by Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, and at the end, so the book is a lot about epigenetics and how we are the result of our beliefs. We're not the result of our DNA, which is kind of a radical idea, or it used to be a very radical idea.
Hmm.
And at the end, it said, if you don't like the printout of your life, then you need to see a Psyche person, because that's the energy psychology modality that he used. And so I searched for somebody for a year and found my person through a woman's group. And I started seeing her every week for about 8 months, and my life changed completely. Everything about my life changed. My relationships improved. My health got better dramatically, quickly. Um, I I wasn't searching for spirituality, but that's right where I landed, and it was perfect.
Wow. So explain to us, what is Psych K?
So Psyche K, it's PSYCH hyphen K. is psychology with kinesiology. So the K stands for kinesiology, and it is where we use muscle testing in order to talk to the subconscious mind to see what's there. And if there isn't something that we want in our subconscious, then we do a change process and install it, kind of like installing a new software on your computer. But then it's up to you to use your new software. So you can install wonderful software on your computer, but if you never actually use it, it just stays there. So that's the partner's job, is to follow through on the action steps.
Wow. I keep hearing more and more about, you know, people saying, like, just in general, people saying like this is all just a simulation. And and when you use like, that analogy that it's like installing new software, I'm familiar with some other modalities that are kind of similar, that is exactly what it is, and it works.
Mhm.
That it's so amazing. For those people who don't know what muscle testing is, can you give a brief description of that?
Sure. So muscle testing it has been used for a long time. Kinesiology is where you keep a muscle strong and the body either keeps it strong or it goes weak. So your body's like a battery, and when you're congruent, the signal stays strong, muscle stays strong. And if you're not congruent, signal goes weak. So muscle goes weak. And
I've
it's
seen this.
it's simple, non-invasive. I typically use the shoulder muscle. So you put your arms straight out, and that's the muscle I typically use, but you can use lots of different ones.
I've seen it done that way before, and I think that's probably the most dramatic way. Like you said, if you do that before you do your work and then do it after, you can see a dramatic difference. Like it's undeniable when you do it that
Yes.
way. Wow. So in your work, Shannon, first of all, you mentioned that this is not just for your love relationship. It can be for family relationships, work relationships, and your belief is that we're designed to be in community and in relationship. But a lot of times, even when people are working on their relationship, they will get some good work done with the therapist, and then they won't even go home and necessarily talk to each other about it.
Right.
How do you encourage that?
Um, well, like you said, it's when you can do your work together, especially in your most intimate, most important partnerships, like your companion partner, your love relationship. When you are able to do that and witness each other's work, it helps build so much more compassion and bandwidth for your partner, to help you through when you are having a hard time, because we all have hard days.
Mhm,
And like in relationships, I get to have a hard day, my husband gets to have a hard day. It's a bad day for a relationship when we both have a hard day.
mhm,
And I like Brene Brown talks about this, and I love her way of putting it, that some days I'm at 80%, so I can carry his 20%.
mhm.
Some days I'm at 30% and is at 70%. So together we make a whole, but it's not always 50-50. So when you do work together and you witness each other, it's a lot easier to have the patience and bandwidth to be like, okay, he's having a bad day. I'll give him some grace with this. We need a timeout. And then to come back versus having a bad day for your relationship where you're both like, "Eh."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. That's really beautiful. So when you're working with people, you're working with the two people together, say. So just using like a love relationship, you're working with both of them at the same time, not
Mhm.
not one of them individually. So if they're coming to you, I imagine that most people are coming when they really need help and they're not just
Yeah.
coming for regular maintenance because everything's wonderful, right?
Right.
And so, um, what if what if one of them is a narcissist and it's difficult to even be in the same room together, or, there's some sort of abuse going on? How do you navigate that?
Right. Well, first and foremost is if there is physical abuse or substance abuse, we can't do the couples therapy or couples work together, because it's all focused on overcoming the substance abuse, or especially if it's domestic violence, that is the focus. But if it's I hate to term it as regular, but if it is typical couples not getting along because one is a narcissist and one is a codependent, then we can work with that. Um, and the way that we work with it is a lot of in going back into your past, because like we were talking before, subconscious mind runs the show 95% of the time. We're only conscious we're consciously choosing only 5% of the time.
Mm.
So a lot of the times what's coded as narcissistic behavior are behavior patterns that people learn in their childhood, which is then reinforced by our society. And so when we unlearn some of those behaviors, it's about, we're all good people, but sometimes we have bad behaviors that need to change. So it's really partnering with the person. Say we're talking about a narcissist. It's partnering with them and be like, "Oh, poor you. You didn't deserve this. You didn't deserve to learn this behavior. Now we have to unlearn it. And it's going to be a little bit of effort, but it's worth it, because your quality or quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. And that's what gets people to keep coming back, because
Well,
they see a change."
so I feel like the term narcissist is way overused lately. It seems to be everywhere. Um, I've almost started not paying attention when I see people talking about narcissism, because I'm like, they're just labeling everything that. Can a true narcissist be helped? Because I've I've heard that a true narcissist doesn't care. Like, they don't necessarily care about their relationships being good. But that's hard for me to
Well,
believe that people don't care about that. Like you said, everyone's a good person. They just need to unlearn behavior. Is that true for is that really true for most of us?
I I totally agree with you. I think narcissism has been misused, because true narcissism would be like sociopathic behavior. And is there help for those people? I want to live in a world that there is, and I
Mhm.
believe that there can be help for them. Um, but outside of that, yes, I do believe people with the right leverage, if they want to, if they want to learn new behavior, anybody can. I really do believe that. But there has to be a good enough reason.
Mm.
And what I typically see is somebody like that is partnered with a codependent that enables the behavior.
Mm.
And this sounds scandalous, but if you're not happy in your relationship, stop acting happy. Stop doing the laundry. Stop cooking. Stop going to them to the parties. Like, stop acting happy if you're not actually happy, because that's the leverage that the other person needs to change.
Wow. And so but that's what codependent people do. They keep acting happy, which enables the other person's behavior. What
Right.
causes someone to be codependent?
Well, it's the same thing, opposite side. So it's learned from our childhood. We a lot of times codependents are we grow up as hero children. We're the people pleasers. We're we're groomed for it.
Hmm.
And we're there's a because there's a lot of reward in our society to being a yes person, right? We
Yeah.
we build this psyche where we are available to everybody and we want it comes from a deep-seated compassionate place of love, but then we get so depleted, resentment starts to build in the background. And resentment is the rust that ruins relationships.
Oh, wow. That's a good saying. Resentment is the rust that ruins relationships. That makes sense because it's like you can tolerate a little bit, you can tolerate it, you can tolerate it until all of a sudden it's reached your max and you blow and it's over.
Right.
Wow. So I have so many questions and so many thoughts. This is going back to you said that people are groomed for it. I am grateful and excited about the time that we live in because I feel like, you know, parenting is changing so much. And I look back at, 100 years ago, I think people just didn't have the same regard and respect for life in the past that we have now. Maybe it was harder to survive. People were more used to children dying and things like that. And today we have just a different level of respect for life, which is fostering this, new styles of gentle parenting. Um, Although I will say, sometimes I don't know how well that works all the time. But I notice, like, for example, in my family, my oldest daughter is so kind and sweet, and she does what I ask. She helps out. It's so nice. I appreciate it so much. But I do worry about her becoming a people pleaser. And so I talk to her about things, like how she really feels or why I'm asking her to do this instead of just demanding, demanding, demanding. Um, ha- do, do you have helpful hit tips for those of us like yourself raising the next generations to help to not create children who are adults, children who grow up to become adults that are people pleasers or narcissists?
Sure. Well, for example, you brought up your daughter, and she does a lot of things to help. I think a good conversation, which you probably have already had, is that she has permission to say no and maybe offer her some opportunities to say no, just to sit with how that feels inside of her body.
Okay.
Like what comes up if you say, and maybe make it like a game. I want you to say no to one thing this week and just see what comes up inside for her, because there's going to be somatic feelings. Like feelings are called feelings because they start somatically in the body. And just watch it. Where does it start? Does it have a story to tell? And that practice of even just once a week, just practice saying no.
Wow, I love that. I mean, that really would work for an adult who's in a relationship that they're not happy in, right?
Right. Because
Wow.
how many times a day do we, or how, rather, a better question would be how much of the day do we spend time doing things that we don't like doing or don't want to be doing?
Yeah, and what's the point? Life is short.
Right.
Why
And
would
that's
it?
not to say, there is responsibility. I
Sure.
mean, toilets need to be cleaned. Not my favorite job, has to happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's not to take away from responsibility, but there's an awful lot that we do that we could outsource, we could get help with, um, but that we just keep quiet and do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a chart that I have my clients fill out that it's a quadrant. I like to do it, I'm good at it. I like to do it, I'm not good at it. I don't like to do it, I'm good at it. And I don't like to do it and I'm not good at it. And I'm like, get rid of those things. Somebody else can
Yes.
do those things. You're not good at it anyway. You don't like doing it. Start there. That's a good
Yes.
place to start with saying no to something. Um, so going back to okay, so the people pleaser, you talked about shame before. Do people pleasers tend to come from shame, or is that two separate things?
I think it's two separate things. I think people pleasing is more of a boundary issue. They
Okay.
are boundaryless.
Okay.
They don't have boundaries as versus somebody who's walled off has too strong of boundaries. Shame and grandiosity, it's the same energy, and this is directly from my mentor Terry Real. Um, this is his brainchild, and I think it's brilliant. Shame and grandiosity is the same energy, and the energy is contempt. Contempt pointed inwards at me is shame. When I take the flashlight of contempt and point it outwards, it's grandiosity.
Mm, wow, that resonates. So you work a lot with people with shame and grandiosity. And shame is something that I work with a lot as well because that was my guiding light. My story starts with, doesn't start with, but one of the earliest, most impactful things was I was sexually abused by a babysitter's son on a regular basis from age 4 to 5.5. And that is where the shame began for me. Is there always like a beginning to this shame and grandiosity? Like something happened that imprinted so deeply that like you use contempt, that energy of contempt is created for the person.
Yeah, I do think it has its roots in our childhood.
Mm,
And the unsettling thing that I find is it can come from a look. And I really want to hold all of our caregivers in warm regard that
mhm,
they were doing the best they can. And not, I mean, I don't want to take away from your experience, and it is very parallel to my life experience. Um, but our caregivers coming from a place that they're doing the best they can with what they have. Um, Even a look, mom's changing a dirty diaper, and you're the baby looking up at mom, and she's got this yucky look on her face because it's a bad one. We've all
mhm.
had that experience.
Yeah.
And as a baby, because your prefrontal cortex is not online, meaning you don't have the cognitive ability to say, oh, that's not about me. You just take it in as, oh, that's about me. I wonder what's so bad, just by that look.
Mhm,
And how many tiny instances over the course of our 7 years did that happen from birth to age 7, where schoolyard instances, teachers, impatient adults, impatient parents, and caregivers. And I know I'm certainly guilty of it. I can't count the times where I was impatient with my children, and I know that has an impact.
Yeah.
And that's,
Same, me
where I
too.
came to this work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting to me because like I said earlier, I feel like parenting is changing humanity as a whole. We're healing and improving and doing better. However, like you said, it can just be one look from something that is gross when you're the
Yeah.
mom changing the diaper, you know?
Right.
And so I wonder if we'll ever evolve to a place where we're completely healed and that doesn't happen, or um, if that's even possible. Is there an end goal in mind, or
Mhm.
is this just part of being a human and learning to heal from it and learning to just do better is just part of the game?
Right. It all depends on your perspective, right? In this world of polarity, we don't know love if we don't know hate.
Mm,
We don't know black if we don't know white. And so we need these different experiences in our life. That, in my opinion, is what gives it depth.
yeah. Yeah, so true. I always say, no one ever wants anything bad to happen to their children. But I say, what a boring adult that person will be.
Mhm.
We find our greatest strengths and our greatest gifts on the other side of our greatest hurts. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. But the work that you do helps us to find the healing so that we can find those gifts.
Yeah. And it's about role modeling for our children what we didn't get to see as children.
Hmm.
So we learn to do better. Like all of the stuff that happened in our childhood was not our fault.
Hmm.
But when you get to your adulthood, it is your responsibility
Mm,
to take up the reins and do the self work to heal yourself.
very good. So it's not your fault, but as an adult, it is your responsibility to find the healing that you need
Yeah.
and make the changes. Because like you said, everybody does the best they can with the information that they have. And when you find healing and better information, you do better.
Mhm.
Ah, beautiful. Can you give us practical steps on as an adult coming out of shame or down from grandiosity?
Right. Um, Thank you. So coming up from shame is the practice of bestowing upon yourself warm regard.
How does one do that if they don't like themselves? If they feel like they don't like themselves?
Well, it's a practice
Mm.
and it's something you work at a little bit every day. I think Mel Robbins has the personal high five in the bathroom mirror
Mm.
because we get to receive and give to ourselves all that is so socially packed into what a high five means. And so I love that. Um, Louise Hay, she talks about doing mirror work and being able to hold your own gaze in a mirror and be able to tell yourself that you love yourself.
Mm.
Those are two simple practices. Um, Affirmation is another one. I went to a networking event last night and it was all about social media and doing short form videos. And we collectively were doing affirmations of I am interesting, I am beautiful, I can do this. And so changing your self-talk. And it's not about stopping the bad talk. We all have that personal inner critic. Where I want people to focus is not, don't focus on stopping it. Focus on noticing it. Just notice it and then tell the truth. Is that really true?
Mm.
That's not true. Actually, the truth is I'm doing the best I can. And so I think it's a more helpful approach to working on your self-esteem than, oh, well, you just stop it. You just stop it.
I
Because
don't think
that
it's
seems
possible to
impossible.
just stop it
Yeah,
personally,
but it's tune into it. Tune into it.
instead of just allowing the loop to play, become aware of it so
Become,
that you can make a different decision. Yeah.
yeah. And that often means getting quiet enough and making the space to do it, even if it's just 2 minutes.
Hmm.
And I typically do this because I habit stacking. We've all learned from Atomic Habits, habit stacking. When I go to the restroom, because it's typically a place where I'm by myself, I will just do an inner check-in. How am I doing inside?
Mm.
Like, how am I really doing? And just take a moment to reset because you're already in there. You're already by yourself. You can take 2 extra minutes, no matter what your job is or what you're doing. You have 2 minutes to just check in. And this is taking care of you so you're not foisting yourself onto other people and getting to a place where you become dysregulated.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. And what about coming down from grandiosity?
So grandiosity is a different, it's the same but different. You notice when, like for me, I notice when I sit up a little straighter, I can feel myself puffing up, if you will. You really have to, it's a mind game at that point. You have to bring yourself down. I will literally raise my arms up and pull my energy back down to my heart center.
Oh,
Because it's 12 inches, but when you jump up into your mind and you start making up stories about whether it be a circumstance that happened or people that are around you, and you start telling yourself stories, well, who do they think they are? um, you've moved from heart centered to head centered, and it's just pulling your energy back into your heart. And I don't, it's not harder, but it's something you have to consciously do. Whereas coming up out of shame, it is still you still consciously have to catch yourself. You still have to notice the the talk. But the tricky thing is shame feels bad.
mm-hmm.
So it's easier to catch. Grandiosity feels good. So we really have to notice, oh, am I up in the clouds? Am I feeling better than? And you have to make yourself come down. Because
Yeah.
that's the sneaky truth is grandiosity feels good.
I was thinking that when you said you know, you don't want to say that it's harder, but it is kind of harder because it does feel good. And one trigger I was thinking maybe would be if you're feeling better then, like if you're feeling like justified and pointing the finger at somebody else, that's a good trigger to know
Yes.
that it's time to pull your energy back down into your heart. And that's just beautiful because our head, the logical self, the ego will do all those things. And then when we bring it down into the heart, our heart doesn't do those things.
Right.
Our heart settles it way down. Ah, I love this conversation. Another thing that you mentioned is shadow work. So, talk to us about shadow work and how that plays a role in your work.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Carl Jung coined the term the shadow and labeled it as all of the different aspects of ourself that we shun, that we don't like. Um, a good place to kind of spot your shadow is all of your judgments of other people. Because we project what we can't be with inside of ourselves will project out into the world, and that's what triggers us. So recognizing that those are just unowned parts of ourselves that we need to invite back in and make room for liberates us from that psychic energy of holding the door closed, if you will.
So talk me through an example of that in like a couple. You know, if I am projecting something or, an emotion or a thought onto my husband, give me an
Yeah.
example of how I would recognize that and then make space for it in myself.
Sure. So I worked with somebody on this yesterday, and the first he was questioning fidelity. And so he needed a lot of reassurance that his partner wasn't being unfaithful to him. And after talking with him about it a little more, it comes down to the fact that he's actually very lonely. He's projecting infidelity onto his partner because inside he feels so lonely. And what he wants in that situation isn't a fight about infidelity, although the fight will give the illusion of closeness, right? Because it's still energy inside of the relationship. Um, what he really wants is to move closer together. But he holds it away by creating this fight about infidelity, um, because he can't see that inside of himself, that his own walls, his own internal walls, is keeping him away from his wife emotionally. So he projects that onto her as infidelity, which is not actually happening. And so what he really wants is closeness from her. So after a conversation, he was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. I'm not actually worried about that. This is what I want instead." Does
Wow.
that make
So
sense
his
to you?
inner walls were keeping him away from his wife, so keeping him lonely, even though he wanted to be close. And so he's picking a fight with her because that creates energy, some closeness, which actually pushes her farther away. So it's like
Mhm.
what he fears, what he actually wants and what he fears not having, he's creating because he isn't acknowledging what he wanted inside.
Right.
Aren't
And
aren't we interesting as humans?
we we are.
It's silly humans. Why do we do that? Oh my gosh. I
But like
so
how many times that has happened in my life where it wasn't like um it's not my husband, but I will create situation like that in my co-working space where all I want is closeness. So rather than being in touch with the lonely feeling inside of myself, we have a rupture.
Mhm.
And that rupture ultimately will bring us back closer together, but it was created from a sense of, or from a place of need.
Yeah. Are
And
there
if I
times
would,
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Or if I could have tapped into that need before um before creating a fight, then we could have avoided the fight altogether.
Yeah.
But I guess I tell you that to illustrate, like, I am on the path with you all. Like,
But
my
I
lessons
found that
are
the best healers are the people who, like you, came to their healing because they needed to, because, God kind of kicked you in that direction and you found your healing there. And really, you're just a few steps ahead. Like you've been there, you know what that looks like, you know where the person's going. To me, those are the best healers. And I believe that the work is never done. We're
mm-mm.
always uncovering more and more and deeper layers.
Yes.
So I think that's beautiful. So, how, um, shadow work, going back to shadow work, can you uncover your shadow yourself?
Sure, you can, but it's if you have a pattern in your life and the players change, but the pattern stays the same, there's a shadow at play or a subconscious belief. If you don't know what your patterns are, ask your people. Ask the people you spend the most time with. They'll be happy to tell you. If you permission them to tell you in a loving way.
That was just great. That sounds like a fun conversation, but necessary, honestly,
Yeah.
right?
And like one of the best tools I think with working with the shadow, which I it can be coded as shadow work, it can be coded as self-esteem or grandiosity work, is just at the end of the day, just take stock. Where in my day was I down in shame? Or where in my day was I up in grandiosity? Like, what happened? And just do self-reflection. Like, what happened? When was I up? When was I down? Where was that in my body? Like, what was the physical sensation? What was the story I told myself about that situation? And that story, that is gold because then you start noticing that's where patterns come. Like, oh, I have a pattern of, or I'm overcoming a pattern where when there's a rupture, that means the absolute end of days, end of the relationship. And I've healed this pattern in a lot of ways, but it still shows up with my relationships with close women friends. Like something will happen and oh no, it's over. We're never going to be friends again. And
Mhm.
that's a pattern that I was able to see because it kept showing up. Like, oh, I was up in grandiosity or down in shame. I definitely feel this one in my um, left hip area. And the story I always tell myself when there's a rupture is, oh, she's never going to talk to me again. What happened? What's going to happen? And because I kept seeing that same story, then that's the shadow. The abandonment is the shadow that I get to heal and make room for. Because inside of abandonment is a remarkable gift. How many areas in your life is it helpful to be abandoning? Well, if you have good boundaries, you don't stay with partners that take up too much space or cross your line constantly. So if you can look at your pattern, look at the shadow, find how it helps you in your life, it helps you accept that part of yourself.
Wow, I love that. That's what a good practice. So, um, you recommend that at the end of the day, you just take stock, like journaling those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. as you were talking, I was thinking of some patterns that I've recognized in my life, and I'm not sure that I fully have realized what is the shadow aspect so that I can make space for it in my life. I have some work to do after this conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
um, I have a couple of closing questions for you, but before we get there, is there anything that we haven't hit on that you want to share with our audience?
Oh, I mean, the well is deep. I would share that your patterns are nothing to be ashamed of, and that you can overcome them. We are strong, resilient human beings are amazing, and you absolutely have the power to overcome anything if you decide that you want to.
That's so true. We do have the power to overcome everything, which is such a better space energetically to come from than feeling like a victim. And I also love that you said if you choose to, because some people don't choose to because they get something from being the victim or they
Mm.
get something from, whichever role they're playing. And in the moment, whatever they're getting outweighs any reason to heal.
Absolutely. We all know those people.
Yeah. 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 On that note. And that's okay though. No judgment, that's their journey. And like you said in the beginning, if there becomes a big enough reason to change, they may change.
Mhm.
Or the relationship will change and they'll go do the same thing somewhere else.
Right.
And that's fine too. That's their path.
Yes.
And we have no judgment on that. So if people are recognizing themselves in this conversation, because I have a feeling, especially those with shame, codependency, will definitely recognize themselves in this conversation. If they want to reach out to you, Shannon, what's the best way for somebody to reach you?
Um, you can find me on my website, shannoncurran.com. I am also on Facebook, shannoncurrananderson.com. That's my Facebook is Shannon Curran-Anderson. Um, those
And
are the
Curran
two
is
best.
Curran,
Correct.
just to be clear. Great. So I have two questions before we close. The first one is, what is one book that you would recommend all of our listeners to read?
Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton.
I have that one. It's a good one. It's a
Yeah.
really good one. And I think like you said in the beginning, when it first came out, it was very challenging to the status quo. More and more people are accepting it. However, I feel like it's still very challenging to the status quo. However, I would just encourage everyone who doesn't want to challenge the status quo to just try it yourself.
Mm. Can I
Read the
throw
book and
another one in?
yeah, please.
Uh, my mentor Terry Real's book, The New Rules of Marriage. That's a great book for relationships.
That sounds like one I should get. I love my husband and we're always trying to do better. So that
Yeah,
sounds like a good one. The new rules of marriage.
marriage.
The new rules of marriage. Got it. And Shannon, my last and final question for you is, what is one thing that you wish everybody in the world knew?
I wish everybody knew how precious they are,
Mm,
how truly valuable and precious they are.
that is so beautiful. I'm going to end on that note. I have nothing more to say. I hope everybody sits with that and just, in a meditation or reflection or the 2 minutes in the bathroom that they take and just contemplate how precious you are. Thank you so much for being here today, Shannon. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And, I just hope that it encourages people to seek help because, like we said in the very beginning, we're meant to be in relationship. We're not meant to do this alone. And, better relationships, better world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.